We have a lot to cover in today's video, including some trade talk around Pierre-Luc Dubois, who appears to be getting closer and closer to heading to Los Angeles. We have an update of a blockbuster trade between the Flyers and Blues that we discussed yesterday. Still not completed, it's had a snag. We know a little bit more about what's holding things up. Plus, Erik Karlsson spoke about getting a trade hopefully this offseason. We'll discuss where there might be some possibilities for him. Could Matt Murray find his way back to the Pittsburgh Penguins? And of course, there's also another trade in Philly that's rumored sending Tony DeAngelo back to Carolina. We'll discuss all that we know about all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, there's a lot going on in the NHL. We've kind of seemed to be at a holding pattern here, but there's all kinds of deals that are being discussed. Some are getting closer than others, and we have lots to talk about today. Before we do get into the trades, though, there are a few signings to discuss. First up, the Arizona Coyotes today have announced that they've signed goaltender Connor Ingram. He gets a 3-year contract with an average annual value of $1.95 million. Pretty good contract for him. He's been a pretty good goalie for a few teams now, but seems to have found a home in Arizona. Last year, he appeared in 27 games, putting up a .907 save percentage and a 3.37 goals against. That might not sound overly impressive, but the .907 actually is pretty good, especially considering he was on one of the weaker teams in the NHL. So overall, it's a good landing spot for him. They have Ingram and Vimolka now under contract, so we know the Coyotes are trying to be a more competitive team and see if they can win a few more games. So obviously this will help going forward. And it's not official by the team as of yet, but I've seen Elliotte Friedman reporting that the Vegas Golden Knights have come to terms with Adin Hill. Of course, their Stanley Cup winning goaltender. They went through a lot of goalies this past year. But Hill was the one in the net for the last good stretch getting into the Stanley Cup. He apparently gets a 2-year contract at $4.9 million. Now, that's going to be interesting to see how this affects the overall goalie situation with the Golden Knights. Of course, we know they have a total of about 5 goalies that could be on their roster next year. I think it's safe to say after this contract that Adin Hill is going to be there. Very well could be the starter or in a tandem situation. Logan Thompson is under contract as well for 2 more years at $766,000, and he was expected to be the starter going into this year, and I think many expected him to be for sure next year. He unfortunately ran into some injuries this year, so given their cap situation and I think their belief in Thompson, I would be quite surprised if Thompson's not there. They really need him to be there for, like I said, for the contract really helps, and he's a good goalie, and I think they still have a lot of faith in him. So that leaves Muriel, who of course started the year on injured reserve, had a major recovery, came back, played really well, helped get Vegas to where they were in the playoffs, then got hurt again. So you got to think though that with Hill and Thompson where they're at, and the series of serious injuries he's faced, that Brossoit likely won't be back in Vegas. I really don't know what his future holds. It's going to depend on his health, and we don't know a lot about that. We know Jonathan Quick was brought to Vegas as a reinforcement, you could say. At the deadline, I don't think there's a future there. And they still have Robin Lehner under contract, who missed the entire season due to severe injuries as well. He had multiple surgeries, including a hip surgery. So I do wonder what Lehner's future holds. He's those 2 years left at $5 million. I guess we'll find out if there's potential for a trade or buyout here in the next little while. I don't even know for sure if Robin Lehner is 100% healthy. We haven't really heard much about him in quite some time. So it's hard to say. They can't buy him out if he's not recovered and considered healthy. Is he tradable? Other teams are going to want to know if he's healthy before they trade for him as well. Now, if he's not, there's possible that another team could still maybe pick him up if they're willing to take the chance that they can put him on LTIR and kind of spend above the cap. But we don't really know where things are on. I haven't heard any reports regarding him and his health. So I think it's more than likely going to be turning towards Hill and Thompson, but that's going to leave Jonathan Quick and Brossoit on the UFA market, and potentially a complicated situation where Vegas is going to have to try to move Robin Lehner. At least that's how things look. I can't imagine a scenario where they trade Thompson and they try to go with a combo of Hill and Lehner, because that's going to have almost $10 million tied up in goaltending, and they just don't have the cap situation to be doing that. So we'll see what happens, but Robin Lehner's the real question mark here, and we don't know what's going on there. Erik Karlsson spoke to the media ahead of the NHL Awards in Nashville, talking about how he'd really like to have a situation unfold where he could be traded ASAP, so as soon as possible, but at the same time, he wants to make sure that things are getting done right, and he ends up in the right spot. Obviously, has some control over where he goes, given the trade protection in his contract. So he has a lot of say here where things end up. We do know the Sharks would have to eat a fair bit of money for just about any team to accommodate a deal. We know Karlsson's had a phenomenal season, is nominated for the Norris Trophy, which he mentioned he was proud of and happy with, but at the same time, he's looking for championships here and acknowledges that he feels like time is running out and a lot of years have gone by. He doesn't know how many years he's got left and wants to try to get a championship before it's all over. Obviously, he acknowledged his good friend and former teammate Mark Stone, who just won the Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights, acknowledging that he's going to celebrate with him when given the opportunity, but wants to have his own chance to win, and he's going to obviously be looking at any options that might present themselves and deciding on a trade on based on where he feels he has the best chance to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, we've heard about a variety of interest in Karlsson before, but that mega contract he has still has a lot of term and money left on it, and it certainly does complicate things. So it'll be interesting to see if the Sharks do figure things out. We've heard, like I said, a variety of teams, but right now there hasn't been anything to a point where we've heard NHL insiders getting reports that things are close or that there's any specific teams that are working with the Sharks to try to get this done. But doesn't mean it won't happen. It very well could happen at the draft or could happen shortly thereafter. But I would think that the time is running out, though. If they don't get a deal done by the early part of free agency to move Karlsson, then teams are going to end up having a lot of their decisions made, a lot of their money spent, cap space tied up. It's going to make it even more complicated to get a deal done. And I really think it's a now or never approach with San Jose. If they can't get a deal done here shortly to get him moved, I think that it's going to be a situation where it's going to be that much harder and more complicated in the future to get a trade done. What if he doesn't have the season coming up like he did last year? The interest could, kind of way off too. So it's hard to say how this plays out. But hopefully for his sake, he gets what he wants and can find his way to a new club. Of course, last night we talked about a blockbuster trade that was rumored to be going down and really close between the Flyers and Blues. The deal, we don't know the exact parameters of everything, but we do know that it had multiple pieces going from Philly to St. Louis, including Kevin Hayes and defenseman Travis Sanheim. There's some that believe that it could have also included forward Scott Laughton as well. And then going back to the Flyers was believed to be a few pieces, including a defenseman who we've now kind of narrowed down to be Torrey Krug, who would not waive his no-trade clause. So that is what held up things and why this deal has not happened here as of yet. I don't know the exact details going from St. Louis to Philly, but we do know for sure there was a defenseman. And based on NHL insiders talking to some agents and a few other sources, they narrowed down which defenseman, because a lot of their D have no trade clauses, which I don't understand why Doug Armstrong has given out so many of those. Wasn't full no trade protection the main reason why former Blue and captain Alex Pietrangelo left the team in free agency, went to Vegas because he got what he wanted? I don't understand why he wouldn't provide it there, but yet he gave it to everybody else on the other side here. Either way, Torrey Krug was believed to be the guy who won't waive, and really, do you blame him? He's going to be taking a step back, going to a rebuilding team. He and his wife have a young family. They just had a child a few months ago as well, and I can understand him putting family first. Now, it's believed as well that the deal's not completely dead, but it's at a point where basically the Flyers would have to flip Torrey Krug to another team that he would consider waiving for if this deal has any chance to happen. But it's believed that at this point the deal is probably going to have to be reworked. That it's not expected for Krug to end up changing his mind. So if that's the case, the St. Louis Blues, they really want to shake up their blue line and move a body out. It's looking like it's going to have to be a different defenseman. I'm sure that's going to complicate the relationship with Torrey Krug, but that's his right. He has it in his contract. And if he wants to say no, he's been given that opportunity to do so. It could end up changing things, so it maybe just a deal of Hayes to the Blues on his own. Hard to say, but that it could end up being that. It's believed that Travis Sanheim was getting a lot of interest from other clubs. And if this deal does not get reworked and go down, that there's a lot of other teams, including the Winnipeg Jets and to some extent the Toronto Maple Leafs, showing interest in Travis Sanheim. Apparently before he inked his new long-term contract that he signed with the Flyers, he was getting some interest from other teams that were calling the Flyers considering about a trade. They ultimately ended up deciding to keep him and sign him instead. And of course, the contract really, for the most part, most teams think it's a fair deal, so they don't have any issues picking him up via trade now. So we'll see. There should be no shortage of interest there, and it might end up being different deals with different clubs. And instead of the big blockbuster deal that was originally rumored, there was also confirmation last night that it was really close to having another trade between the Flyers and the Carolina Hurricanes, sending Tony DeAngelo back to Carolina with 50% retention by the Flyers. So he's making $5 million. He's got 1 year left. So that would go back to Carolina for $2.5 million, which was believed to be, it was either going to be something real small. It wasn't much going back. Some sort of a prospect, I believe, or maybe a really late pick. But I seen at one point there was reports saying that deal hit a snag. Then I seen another report saying that, another report said they believe that snag was worked out, but yet the deal still hasn't been announced. So I don't know what's holding things up on that front. Then there's some other people today that said that those two deals between the DeAngelo deal to the Canes and the other trade involving Hayes, Sanheim, etc., that there could be connection, and that one deal might be holding up the other. So we really haven't put all the pieces together here yet, but I'm sure over time we'll learn more and we'll see what happens. But those are all in the hopper being discussed, and hopefully they get them to the finish line and see if they can get worked out here. There's also some reports that Kyle Dubas, before he left the Toronto Maple Leafs a few weeks back, that he was very open and interested in possibly keeping Matt Murray around for the final year of his contract with the Maple Leafs. So that it was likely going to be coming back with, instead of doing a buyout and having, the hit on the cap for 2 years, that he was leaning towards just keeping him, going with a Samsonov and Murray combo with Joseph Wall still there as well. And at this point, there's some people that are thinking that Dubas might be interested in bringing him to Pittsburgh. There's a lot of question marks with the Pittsburgh goalie situation. Of course, Tristan Jarry's a pending UFA. He's had a lot of injuries over this time. So was Murray, for that matter. Inconsistent play, but at times really good. Really difficult to say where things go. I mean, Murray obviously has a lot of history in Pittsburgh, winning multiple Stanley Cups there, but fair to say that he's gone through a lot, had a lot of injuries, a lot of inconsistent play, and that he's not really the same goaltender that he was back then. I'd be really curious to see if Dubas and the Penguins do end up having interest in bringing Murray to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, it's kind of an interesting story. I don't know that you wouldn't think, based on how things went in Toronto last year, that he would have been that confident to bring him in, especially if he has to play a significant role. That, to me, would be extremely risky, but we'll see here in the next little while as the goalie situation in Pittsburgh hopefully becomes a little bit more clear. And it's believed as well that the Jets and the Kings are getting close to the finish line on being able to complete a Pierre-Luc Dubois blockbuster trade to the Los Angeles Kings. Reports indicate right now that the Jets have given consent to LA to talk contract, and that basically if that gets worked out, I think we're going to have ourselves a deal. They're looking for a sign-in trade, possibly an 8-year contract, or maybe less, I'm not sure. If it needs to be 8 years, he'll have to be obviously signed with the Jets and then trade it. But it's believed he wouldn't be going to LA on his own. The Jets would also include forward Jansen Harkins, mainly because of cap situation. The LA Kings are going to need a few cheaper contracts of some forwards to have good value bargain contracts, and Harkins is making under $1 million, so that would be helpful for them. It's believed the package going back to the Jets for Dubois at this point is going to include young centerman Gabe Vilardi and forward Alex Iafallo off the roster. There's likely other pieces in there as well. We don't know what those are, but those are the main roster players who could obviously fit with the Jets right away. And then I believe there's likely some combination of a pick prospect, something else in there too, which we don't quite know those details. But I mean, that would be a good help for the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, those are two forwards who could step in right away. Vilardi could be a top 6 center for them. Iafallo certainly either a top 6 or top 9 winger, depending on where he slots in the lineup. Certainly a very capable player, though, for sure. At the same time, we don't know what else the Winnipeg Jets are going to do. If Scheifele sticks around, then they could have the top 2 centers be Scheifele and Vilardi. They still have Cole Perfetti in the mix as well. I mean, he may not be a centerman right away, though, but I think long-term he could be, but we'll see. Either way, I know the Montreal Canadiens I think they're still somewhat in the mix for Dubois, but I don't see them coming along and offering a better deal at this point, but you can really never know. I mean, it was rumored before that the trade that was going to be going to the Jets, or at least rumored, was Christian Dvorak and Josh Anderson. Obviously, There could be other pieces there too, pick prospect, etc. But yeah, I don't know. But the Habs may not have been crazy about paying Dubois what he was looking for. It's rumored that he's looking for $9 million on a long-term deal. I'll be curious to see if LA actually gives that to him or if he comes down a little bit on his price tag. But that deal sounds like it's close. At this point, I don't necessarily expect any of these trades to be completed tonight. But you just never know. Well, last night we thought we were getting a couple of deals that never happened. We thought it was coming today. And here we are now well into the evening. And we have nothing yet, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.